Welcome to UConn Social Day, guys. We figured it'd be a great way to open up the day with resident good boy, Jonathan, and we had Tildy make an appearance in that as well. My name is Emily Zangari, and I am the social media manager here at UConn, so I run all of our flagship accounts. I see all your snow day tweets, and no, I cannot shut down the school, so please stop tweeting at us. On behalf of the University Communications and myself, we want to thank you for coming to the first ever UConn Social Day. This is a day-long event designated to our students, faculty, and staff to help you guys build an online social presence. A little bit about today. We have a great lineup of speakers, including UConn alums, UConn faculty members, student influencers, and industry thought leaders. On top of our various social media sessions, we also have one-on-one profile consultations that you can take advantage of. There's going to be a table starting at 1 p.m. just outside this room. And we have university faculty members who will sit down with you, go through your social profiles, give you some advice. You can ask any questions you might have. So I definitely recommend taking advantage of them out there. On top of that, we also have in room 320, which is just down the hall here, we also have our photographer at our University Communications here to take LinkedIn headshots, so definitely take advantage of that. We also have a photo booth right outside this door, complete with UConn emoji cutouts, so don't miss that social media opportunity. All sessions will be followed by a brief question and answer period. If you're in this room, we will have a mic runner, so you can just flag her down if you are interested in asking a question. Other than that, our first breakout session will start at 2 p.m. And in the student track kicking off in here, we have UConn alum Matthew Netchie, who will be speaking on professional branding. Our UConn faculty and staff track will be located just down the hall in 310 for those interested. And we have communications professor Ann Oldorf Hirsch kicking things off with our faculty social media lounge. I hope to see everyone back in this room for the fundamentals of fan engagement, which will be keynoted by UConn alum, former football player and NFL analyst for ESPN, Dan Orlovsky. And of course, we encourage everyone to be social during this event using our hashtag UConn Social Day. So social media influencer is a term that is thrown around a lot today, but what is it and how do you become one? Today we have Sarah Merrill here to help us dive into this a little bit more. What started as a hobby in the basement of her sorority house began her social media career with an anonymous Twitter account called Big Kid Problems. Her witty complaints about impending graduation and adulthood resonated with fellow students and began growing a following. Once the Instagram platform launched, so did her career. She now runs a full-fledged empire with over 250,000 followers, online and merchandise, brand partnerships, and more. So please help me welcome Sarah.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. As Emily mentioned, I'm Sarah Merrill. I run the account Big Kid Problems. Has anybody ever heard of it? Show of hands. One person, yes, a couple. Oh, hello. Yeah, I started this in college. It was completely meant to be a joke. Like Emily said, I was getting ready to graduate, started putting things out there about not wanting to be an adult, not knowing how the adult world worked. And this was actually before Instagram came out, not to sound really, really old, but when I was in college, we didn't have Instagram. It's crazy, crazy times. So I started on Twitter and was just pretty consistent, putting out tweets every day. It started getting a little bit popular on campus, and I just kept doing it. And then when Instagram came out, started taking my tweets, turning them into memes. Anybody meme fans out there? Meme fans? All right, cool. And that's when things really took off. So I have turned this little hobby that I thought, I'd make a couple of my friends laugh into a business, and that's why I'm in my power suit today, because I'm going to teach you guys the business of social. But it really, now I make almost 400,000 people laugh every day. It's crazy, and the opportunities that are out there for every single person who's interested in the social space is just incredible. So I'm excited to tell you guys a little bit more about it. What we're gonna do is, when I think of influencer, I'm gonna define what an influencer is, but we're also gonna kind of break down what you need to do. So we're going to talk about gaining a following, getting sponsorships, and creating a lasting brand. All right, so one of the main questions I get as an influencer is, what does that mean? And anybody who's interested in doing this for a living, get ready from the questions from your parents, because they never stop. But an influencer, we're gonna take a look at the root word, influence, right? It's the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something. So to be an influencer, you need somebody to influence. You need an audience, correct? So that's one of the big first things we're gonna talk about right now, is growing an audience. And that's what everybody wants to know. How do I get more followers? Now, I could spend all day just talking about this topic. I'm gonna give a pretty broad general overview. I'm gonna give you a couple specifics that have helped me. And then I think we are gonna do a Q&A at the end of this, right? So if you have any questions, just write them down. We can always circle back. First and foremost, I'm gonna get into growth hacks in a little bit later, but I can teach you all the growth hacks in the world, but if somebody comes to your page and it doesn't look good, or you don't have good content, they're not gonna follow you. So that's why we're starting off with this first thing being having great content. Now, you guys have I know you are familiar with social media, and there's things out there you could post 1 million selfies, you can do things like that, but you really wanna bring value to your audience. Bringing value is what's gonna make people actually want to follow your content. So I heard this at a social media conference a couple years ago, and now I ask myself this every single time I put a post up. Does it educate, inspire, or entertain? Because it has to do one. It has to do one of those things. That's really gonna bring value to your audience and make people coming back to your page. Also, you wanna mix it up. So we've all heard about Instagram algorithms. People, have mixed opinions about the algorithms, and they're constantly changing. But one thing has been consistent is video has been known to have higher engagement. So if you're somebody who just posts photos, maybe mix it up, throw a little video in there. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You can throw in a boomerang, that counts. But just an idea to kind of mix up your media, because that's gonna help your engagement rates. All right, and now we're gonna talk about enhancing content. So there's 2 ways to enhance your content, right? You can take your individual photos and you can enhance those. So I've outlined a couple apps that I use, especially if we're going to talk about Instagram being your main platform. That is such a visual platform. People who go to that site, if you have a crisp, clear photo, it makes all the difference in the world. So there's a couple apps that I like to use to just enhance your images a little bit more. I like Faded, I like Lightroom. Have any of you guys heard about presets? Anyone? Yeah. So you can actually buy presets, which are a professional photographer will create a preset, which you can apply to your photo, and it looks like a professional editor edited your photo, kind of like they did in magazines. So that's really something to consider, because even just the slightest change in photo quality actually really does make a difference and will make people more inclined to come back to your material. Aside from just the individual photo, of course you have the overall aesthetic of your profile as well. So there's a couple apps I've put in here too, Unum and Planoly. These are great because you can actually take the grid format of your Instagram and plan out where you want to put your posts, so that when somebody comes to your page, the overall thing looks really aesthetically pleasing. Some people don't always think of that, but you need not just the images, but the overall feel to look good too. Of course, we're gonna talk about repurposing your content across platforms, especially as you turn into a business. You want to maximize your offerings, right? If a brand wants you to post an Instagram photo, that's great. But if you have an awesome Twitter following, a Facebook following, a YouTube following, you can just start upcharging. You can really do more with more channels. So I always tell people, because people can stress out about posting across a lot of things, I know I do, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. just take your content and you can repurpose it across those channels. I even just share them like from Instagram directly into Facebook or Twitter, and then repurpose some of the things that you already have. Make it easy. All right, now we're going to talk about casting a wide net. So if you're growing an audience, you also want to be looking constantly for new followers, new people that are going to be attracted to your content. So one of the big main ways, you guys have probably already heard this, but hashtags, hashtag. It really does work. And people don't like to use hashtags sometimes because it can make your post look, a little bit cluttered. But you can max out at 30 hashtags. I recommend, I usually take a bank of about 20 hashtags that are relevant to big kid problems. They're pretty much like standard across the board, big kid problem posts. And I have a keyboard shortcut. So when I go to post, I post my photo, and then I add a comment, so it's not in the actual caption. You add your comment, and then you put your hashtags there. That way when people start commenting on your photo, it disappears, and you don't really see all that clutter. But they work. And that's gonna help you show up on the explore pages. That's gonna help people find you. So if you're like, for me, I'm in comedy and I do hashtag funny memes, hashtag funny videos, all of those things that I show up. When people search for those items because I've hashtagged them, they're more likely to find my content. Now, another big thing that helped me, especially when I was growing in the beginning, was tagging relevant accounts. So for me, I made a list of accounts that were similar to me, or that I thought, were doing a better job. They had more followers, but we were all kind of in a similar space. And so when I would put up a meme, I would tag all of these larger meme accounts, and maybe they would use my content. And that's what happened. So like the Fat Jewish, does anyone follow him? Like he reposted me a couple times, and I would see a 5,000 follower jump overnight. And that's when things like really started to pick up, is when other accounts really started to post me. So I know that I'm in a unique space for memes, but I want you to think about this in a broader sense. So let's say if you're doing like lifestyle or beauty or fashion, if you post a photo, you can take any photo, and I guarantee you can find 1 million accounts to tag from that. I like to use the example of a girl, on vacation drinking her rosé on a rooftop. You can take that picture and put it up on Instagram, or you can think, okay, what's the brand of the rosé? What's the brand of the bathing suit she's wearing? What hotel is she at? What's the location you're at? Are you in Miami? Because then you could tag Miami outlets. There's so many things that you can do when you actually start to get creative about it. And the thing is, a lot of these accounts that you're tagging are also looking for content to post. So if you have a beautiful, well-crafted image that you are tagging that brand in, they then have permission to repost you, or they may choose to repost your content, and that is going to just expose your content to a completely different audience. So something to think about. All right, now obviously when we talk about social, we're going to talk about engagement. So this is where when I was practicing this, I always get a little bogged down on these words, but you really need to, when you are commenting on your own post, like you want to be communicating with other accounts, but you also want to be communicating on your own posts. So what I mean by that is, let's say you post a piece of content. I like to use the trick of like, you can ask a question in your caption, you can do something else, but if somebody writes something in your caption, you can always write back. Start a conversation. That helps boost your post via the algorithm. It'll make it more, when you have more engagement on a post, it lasts longer, it has a better chance of showing up on the explore page. So if you engage more, not only on other pieces of content, but your own, you have a better chance of actually growing your social. Now, liking and commenting relevant hashtags. So we talked about hashtags earlier. Now this is something I used to do back in the Wild Wild West days, and it's become a little bit more streamlined now. But I would take hashtags that I knew were relevant to my content. So like one of my favorites ones was the struggle is real. And I would search anybody who used the hashtag the struggle is real. I would just go and like their photo, like. And what that does is somebody who posted that sees a notification from Big Kid Problems. They don't know what Big Kid Problems is, but they might click on it, they might see my page, they might like it. So it's just kind of thinking a creative way to get in front of a new audience. Also, you can do the same thing for followers of a similar account. So I mentioned the Fat Jewish reposted my content. I would go into the Fat Jewish's followers and just follow. And I know that's kind of frowned upon, but I'm telling you, it's one of the things that work. There are also, have you guys heard of bots? There are bots that do this for you now, but I want to caution anybody from using bots because Facebook and Instagram are going to great lengths, like spending a lot of money to try and rid Instagram of those bots, but it's still a good strategy to employ, especially if you're starting to grow and trying to branch out. Collaboration, people overlook this one so much, but collaborating with your friends or collaborating with other people in the space that you're working in is such a great way to get exposure to their audience. I lived in New York City, and a couple influencers, we were on chats and things like that. They would say, like, I'm gonna book a photographer, does anyone wanna come? We can split the cost and do a couple photos together and a couple individual photos. Like, that's so genius. Because not only are you getting your content a little bit, you're getting your production fees a little bit cheaper, but also you can tag that person, they can tag you, and you're getting exposure to their audience. And the same thing goes, even if you don't meet in person, it's great to network with other accounts. Like I talk to a lot of other meme accounts, and sometimes we do S for S or shout for shout. I'll shout out their content, they'll shout out my content, and it just makes the world go round. So it's a great thing to do. All right, now we're gonna move into sponsorship. So you have some good content, you got your content down. We're gonna talk now getting into the business side of things, working with brands and getting sponsored. So there's really three ways. If you think about it, there's really three ways that you're gonna start working with brands. One, a brand is gonna reach out to you. That's the nice way. Two, you can reach out to a brand. Or three, your agency or management team can facilitate this, which that comes later. That's a great goal to have, but we're gonna focus on the first two first. So one of the easiest ways to have brands reach out to you is to have your information just readily available. On your accounts, you wanna make sure you have for inquiries, email, blank. You wanna make sure that your information is there and let them know that you are open to partnerships. You can say partnership inquiries as well. That's a great way to do it. Also, there is so many, there's a new one every day, I swear, these influencer agencies and micro influencer agencies. Apply to every single one. I literally do a Google search in the beginning of the month, just to see if there's any new ones. And just what you do is you fill out your profile, and brands work with them. They'll search. They want to find an account that has like a particular demographic, a particular audience, and they'll find you that way. It's just really, really easy and doesn't take much work from you. You're just filling out your profile. So I've included a couple that I like, Collectively, Tap Influence, and Viral Nation. But there are, for anybody starting out, micro-influencing agencies are really on the rise, and people are looking for followers, are looking for accounts now that are under 10,000 followers. So there's definitely gonna be more opportunities for more partnerships on the micro side. Now, that's the easy way. And of course, you can always reach out to brands, which is something that I do, and it helps a lot. But when you're reaching out to brands, it's very important. Sometimes, influencers can get a bad rap for this. They do it the wrong way. When you're reaching out to a brand, you really have to think like a brand. What are you bringing to them? What does your audience bring to them? What does your particular voice bring to them? That's gonna bring them value. That's gonna bring them new potential customers. That's an important thing to do. So when I say, whenever you're gonna work with a brand, you need to come with an idea. I use the example of Casper mattresses. Anyone familiar? So Casper, at the time that I worked with them, was only really, they had just started working with influencers, but they were working mostly with like home decor or lifestyle or beautiful, imagery and images from content creators. And they weren't doing memes by any means, but the thing is my audience is like 25 to 35-year-olds, like young professionals living in the city. They're the ones ordering Casper mattresses. They're the ones that don't want to go to a traditional store. They want to just order it online and have it show up. So when I pitched them, I said, let's create some like funny memes about like, we're gonna make it relevant to my audience, this demographic, about, not wanting to go out because our bed's too comfortable. They loved it. So that's what I did. I included it on the side there, and actually it was a video of me just, instead of, it says like, girl, let's go out, it's Friday. Me, sorry, I can't, I'm super busy. And then me all night, just eating popcorn in bed. But this did really well. 54,000 views. I also had stories with them where it showed like my Casper mattress arriving, and like I opened the box and it like exploded in my apartment. But it did well. And so, but that's what I mean, like, you might want to work with a brand, but you can't assume that they're going to know how to work with you. You have to make it very clear, you have to make it easy. So if you're also going to be reaching out to brands, I also recommend putting together a brand deck or even a one-pager, but you want to include some relevant information. You want to make sure that you have, your numbers, you want to make sure you have your demographics, an example of content that could be from a previous sponsorship, or even if it's not from previous sponsorship, because I know a lot of people ask me, well, if I don't have previous sponsorships, how can I get a new one? Well, did you ever have a post where you utilize something, and then you can just show that? Yeah. All right. Now we're going to chat about building a lasting brand. So this is key when you're talking about building social into a business. You have to think a little bit big picture and a little bit more long term. And it's not just getting brand sponsorships, but it's a much bigger overall thing. But the number one thing that people ask me is, what was the moment that like everything changed? Like, when did you go viral? How did you get all those followers overnight? And the real honest answer is that did not happen for me. And we know that happens, like we see that happens. Do you guys remember Yodeling Kid? Like, I'm sitting here, I've been working for 8 years, like putting up 3 pieces of content every day, grinding. Yodeling Kid just yodeled in a Walmart and has like 8 million followers. Like, that hurts. But that is not the normal. That is not the normal experience. The more normal experience is what I'm doing. It takes consistency. You have to post frequently, at least, every day. It depends on, I don't want to give you guys a time of like how much you need to post. It depends on what you're doing. But typically, like they say, once a day. But that's what it is. And if you're gonna do that, you need to be posting about stuff that you like. Because this doesn't happen overnight. This is gonna take a really long time. And if you don't like what you're posting, or if it takes stuff out of you, you're not gonna be able to do it for a long time. I can't tell you how many influencers I talk to that are just so burnt out because it doesn't fill them up and it doesn't light them up. So I always talk about like finding like the purpose of your social media. Like, why do you want to do this? For me, I found my purpose with Big Kid Problems by really trying to think about it. I'm like, why do I like this so much? Like, why am I dedicating more and more time to this? And really, I realized my purpose was that I was struggling to, adult, as we say, but I felt that by putting the things out there, other people were relating to it, other people who were struggling felt better about it. So in a sense, I was helping my peers feel better about their struggles. So once I understood my why, everything else became more clear. And you really need that to push you through the hard days and to push you through, times where you're gonna get negative comments and you're like, why do I even do this? But I do think having a purpose and doing something you love when it comes to being an influencer is very important. Let's see, where are we at? Oh, this is funny. All right, so we're talking about thinking long-term and big picture here. Now, I'm gonna give you an example because, and I'm gonna use this only because I just heard them themselves use this example. Has anybody heard of the Almost 30 podcast? I know, it's a little bit, it's more my generation. But these two girls, they started the Almost 30 podcast when they were almost 30. They were 27, 28, and it blew up. It like did so well. Here we are 5 years later though, and they're like, you know, now approaching their mid-30s. Their brand is almost 30. So I like to use that as an example because you want to think of your brand in terms of long-term. You have to think of, can this grow with me? You don't want to pigeonhole yourself into anything, especially if it's gonna take probably a little bit longer than you would want it to. Also, when you're thinking of your long-term visions, I think it's important to kind of get an idea of like where you want this to go. You know, if you want to potentially turn it into a cooking show, or you want to turn it into a book, or you want to turn it into an organization, the day-to-day activities that you're doing with your account should reflect that so that you can build your way to where you want to go. You know, I give the example, like if you want your own TV show, like I have a friend who's a food blogger, and her absolute dream is to get her own cooking show, but she's not on YouTube. I'm like, girl, you gotta make videos, get your videos out there, get on YouTube. So that's just like an example of something. If you want to focus in on where you're gonna go, because even just doing that, if you can make sure that you have video of yourself on camera, it's gonna help pave the way towards that path of where you want to go. All right, finding your niche, voice, and target. Now this is super important, and I don't want anybody to feel like stifled when I say this, but something I've seen of successful accounts is that they are very, very targeted. They have a very clear voice, they have a very clear thing that they're good at, right? And in truth, when brands are reaching out to us, or when I talked about earlier how brands will use these agencies to like look up influencers and with their demographic and what they're looking for, they're looking at categories. They're looking at beauty, health, food, health and wellness, comedy, the list goes on. But you really want to become an expert or really good in one of these categories so that you can shine. And I'm seeing more and more in this industry, people who get really, really granular are the ones that are doing well. Like I have a friend who is an eye doctor, and she just created like a brand basically on eyeglasses. That's so specific, but like she's the one person doing that. And brands are wanting to work with her already, and she doesn't have like that many followers, but it's amazing. The more specific you can get, the more niche your audience can be, and the more valuable that is to a brand. And I'll use myself as an example with this, and I actually, when I work with companies, I sometimes work with companies to help them strategize their social and to help them figure out like how to grow followers. So when we do this, I talk about pillars of content. Like you always kind of want to stick within your lanes of what your content's about. So for me, Big Kid Problems, I talk about career, I talk about money, I talk about like being single or relationships, I talk about getting older, and the things that come with that, and just like millennial lifestyle. So I stay in my lanes. Like there might be a really funny Trump joke or something, but that's not on brand for me. That's, you know, I don't want to take anything that's not specific to Big Kid Problems and put it on my account, because that's your brand, and you really have to think like a brand here. So I think that's important to note, and just get very, very clear on what your brand is and what your target is and what your niche is. Now this is a big one. You can't sell out. So there's a point in time when you start growing a following and you start getting bigger and better that brands are going to reach out to you or you're going to get approached with some offers. And I can tell you firsthand, it can be very tempting as like a broke 20-something living on your own for the first time for a company to be like, hey, I just need you to post this one image for $100. That $100 is so sweet. But you can't do it. You have to, if you're gonna really become an influencer, and we go back to that definition of having influence over your audience, you can't be like throwing everything out there because your audience won't trust you, and your audience, you'll lose your influence if you do that. So I always caution anybody getting into this business to really be diligent about that, be diligent about the things that they're going to promote, make sure it's something that you would use, make sure it's something that you would recommend to a friend, to a family member, because that's what this is. It's a community, and these aren't just strangers, this is a community. These are your friends, you know? So you just want to be cognizant of that. And one other thing before we get into Q&A, I did want to point this out. The influencer space, like coming of age in this, like I became an influencer before there was an influencer term. And I've seen this industry grow, and I see the trajectory of this industry. And, people ask me, do you think it's gonna bust? This is all gonna be ridiculous in a couple of years. Honestly, I don't. Honestly, I think it is we're scratching the surface right now. I'll give you an example. I was on a TV show in Chicago. I was gonna do a news broadcast, but I was gonna do a couple social media tips on the news. And I was talking to the executive producer, and they were very proud because they just got like all these like really great sponsors and all this stuff. And I was like, what's your viewership? Like, how many people watch this in the morning? And he was like, oh, on a good day, about 15,000. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, 15,000? I'm like, I get like 30,000 on my story posts, And like, as a producer, a sponsor doesn't have those extra costs of having to like make a commercial and do all of those things. Like, it is very cheap and very effective from a brand perspective to work with an influencer as opposed to some of these traditional media things that we've all seen. And just out of my curiosity, like, when's the last time you guys bought something that you saw on a billboard? Anyone? Have you bought anything that you saw on Instagram? Anyone? Couple, I'm seeing some nods. I do it too. There's real value in this, and it's not just me saying it, but also, I pulled a stat this week from Adweek. In 2017, this was a $2 billion industry, and I remember when that was happening, they were like, this is the fastest growing industry, $2 billion, that's insane. In 2020, it's gonna be $10 billion. That's what it's expected to be, and honestly, I think it's gonna grow. So for anybody out there who is interested in this, who is interested in social media, interested in becoming an influencer, there is space. There's lots of space, there's lots of room to grow, and I think it's going to be a really exciting time, and we're gonna see what more jobs can come from this. So thank you guys for listening to my presentation. Any questions? Right here?
I remember the thing you said about bots on Instagram, like following people. Like, when you consistently do that, they can restrict your account by doing that because they think you're a bot. So do you have any advice about like working around that?
Yeah, so the workaround is to do it yourself. But you don't want to do it like too crazy, like if you're doing like 1,000 likes, that's too much. I've been doing it at like 100, I've been fine. But you also want it to be authentic, and that takes a lot of time. So even if you're doing like, does anyone know Gary Vaynerchuk? Gary V? Yeah, he's a big guy in this industry, but he always talks about doing like 10 a day. And even if you do that small number, but you do it consistently, it will help. But yeah, you don't want to do anything crazy because they are restricting accounts. doing that.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
When you first start on like creating an account, how often do you actually post? Do you post more in the beginning than before, or do you usually keep it consistent? I know you said you try to post like once a day. So you do more in the beginning, or at certain times is it better?
When I first started, I think I was doing it once a day, and now that I've gotten it down to like a well-oiled machine. And I should mention this. This is different across like your category. Comedy, memes. There's a lot of content being pushed out there, so I try to do 3 a day, and they're original. So like that takes a lot. I know a lot of other meme. I talk to other meme accounts on the regular that are doing 7 posts a day, 5 posts a day. I try 3. I think like the normal influencer who's maybe in a different category, once a day is the goal.
Hi. Just out of curiosity, have you ever encountered someone who takes your content, and how do you address that?
So glad you just all the time. All the time. Actually, this just happened yesterday. I was on a podcast, we were talking about it, and after the podcast, does anybody follow My Therapist Says? It's a big one. It's a big account. They reposted one of mine that I made, but my tag was off. It happens all the time. The only thing you can really do is you can message them and hope that they're nice and they will credit you, or you can report them. And sometimes it's not worth it. I mean, I've reported some other large accounts for consistently stealing my content, and then, you know, now there's like bad blood, and they will never repost me, you know? So it is a community. I think if you can communicate with other accounts and be like, hey, it's cool that you use this, but just, you know, would you mind crediting me, and seeing how it goes from there. But yeah, it's the worst. I see memes that I made like years ago just circulating like out there in the web, and they're just long gone. My watermark's long gone. But it's fine. It's actually kind of funny to be like, oh, that content like lives on.
What's your favorite brand you've worked with so far?
Oh, that's a good question. Favorite brand I've worked with? I did some really cool stuff with 602. Are you guys familiar with them? It's like the ladies' fashion line from Foot Locker, and they have some like retail stores, but it's all female focused. So I did some like funny content with them where I was like running around New York and like interviewing people, and I just like partnerships that aren't just like, oh, can you post this? You know, I like when things are a little bit more interactive and they actually like want to work with you. Yeah, I think that's like always more fun. Yeah.
I have a question about captions.
Yeah.
And how important they are, or if they are that significant.
It's so funny. I've had this conversation with other influencers, because obviously we see the big celebrities don't necessarily need to put a caption, you know? But I think they're important. For anybody else who's not like Kim Kardashian, I think captions actually help. I think they boost your content. They make things come full circle. I actually have a nice little hack for anybody who sometimes has trouble with their captions. Have you ever heard of Cap Genius? Cap Genius is an app you can download, and let's say you're at the beach and you don't know what to put as your caption, you can type in beach and it'll give you a bunch of funny lines that have beach in it. So you can use one of those as your captions. It gives you a lot of puns. That's always an idea. I think like when in doubt, use a pun. Thanks, guys.
We figured we'd start with Jonathan, since he actually is probably the best person to follow on social media right now. So our first speaker of the afternoon is a 2003 UConn graduate whose journalism and history degree took him to law school and eventually landed him as a partner at Haller & Sage. Outside the office, Matt believes service to others is paramount to the success of an engaged and vibrant community. He's a member of the Board of Directors for Special Olympics Connecticut, the Hartford Hospital Corporators, and a former board member of Leadership Greater Hartford and March of Dimes, Connecticut. He also serves on the Board of Corporators for the I Quilt Plan, a culture-based urban plan for downtown Hartford that seeks to create a more walkable, sustainable, and welcoming downtown. His involvement with the community, as well as his dedication to his alma mater, is apparent if you scroll through his social feeds. And that is why we asked him to come speak to you today on personal branding on social media. So help me welcome Matt.
Thank you, Emily. Typically, I come on to either Pearl Jam or Roots, but thank you very much for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Netchie. So just to give you a little bit of background, I like talking about things that I'm passionate about. Social media, I was saying earlier, I'm not sure passionate's the right word, it's just something I'm really interested in. I think it's an incredibly useful tool. In my line of work, which is primarily litigation and risk management, it can be a dangerous one too. We deal with cases all the time that the case is made or broken on what someone did on social media. It sounds crazy, but that's the reality of what my everyday life is. So I really, we're here for 15 to 20 minutes. If you have a question, you want to speak up, you want to challenge me, please do. I think I perform better as a speaker when I'm responding to someone's question or we're having an active discussion. So we'll leave some time at the end for questions, but feel free to speak up, raise your hand. So branding, when it comes to social media, I think you can take one of two approaches, and I think it's difficult to do a hybrid. I'm a big believer that you should have a personal brand that is truly personal to you. For me, a lot of people know me as a UConn guy because I'm the obnoxious alum who talks about everything about UConn and how great UConn is and how we've gotten screwed in certain athletic conference realignment things over the last 20 years. I'm really popular in that area. To other people, I'm known as the Hartford guy. I absolutely love the capital city, incredibly passionate about the redevelopment of the city because, quite frankly, I'm not here to talk politics, which is another thing I try to avoid on social media, but I'm a true believer that a strong flagship university and a strong capital city is something that's incredibly important for our state, particularly when you're trying to retain young talent, which Connecticut has a difficult time doing. So the other option is personal versus business branding. I have some colleagues who love talking on things like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn purely about work. That's not me. I'm a partner at a law firm that has 100 attorneys. I share the business with 23 partners who own the business, and we're responsible for the livelihood of 250 people. We take that very seriously. I also like making obnoxious comments about things like UConn and the Mets and Greater Hartford on Twitter, right? So my partners, we come from different backgrounds. Some of us have different cultures. We have different life experiences. I can tell you we have extreme differences in politics. I don't want to do anything in Twitter or Facebook, LinkedIn, that is going to potentially be interpreted as speaking for one of them or for the firm. And so I think where I see people struggle with branding with social media is the people that kind of play both sides of the road. They want to talk about their work life, but then they also want to talk about their politics and their personal beliefs. And so my recommendation, if you're talking about branding, pick one of the two lanes and try to stay in them the best that you can. Is there something that I see on Twitter that I think is a really interesting topic about journalism or history or the law? Sure. Will I comment on it? Maybe not. I'll like something or maybe I'll retweet it. But again, we were talking earlier, Julie, about and with Josh Prue from the foundation earlier, people put, they try to brand themselves, but in their bios they say something like a like or a share or a retweet's not an endorsement. Let me be very blunt about it. Anything that goes out on the internet, irrespective of the form that you're doing it on, it's out there as soon as it's done. So your retweets, your comments, they are going to be considered endorsements. So just trained clients in this the other day. If you're not comfortable putting something out, and this is probably an extreme point, I try to tell clients, if you're not comfortable testifying that you said this, if you're not comfortable telling your spouse that you said this, probably something that as your personal brand, you want to keep off of social media. Social media is a real balance. There are incredibly beneficial things that can come to it. Again, tweeting a lot about UConn has given me the ability to meet a lot of people that have similar passions. It's given me the ability to interact with alums. It's given me the ability to come and do something like this. The reason I'm here is because I talk about UConn a lot on Twitter. I don't bash university because frankly I love this place and I think it's a great institution that we all have an obligation when we leave to give back to. And so that's something that's been a positive, but I've equally seen people that have used it as a tool for not good. And I will say this in advance, please excuse language that I'm going to use. I'm not here to offend anybody. And I'm not here to get you guys in trouble for inviting me. So I'll try to be, I'll give a toned down version. For those of you who are alive, you know that we have a president who is controversial, not commenting one way or the other on the politics of it. But in Connecticut, it was a big hot topic issue because he gave his State of the Union address a couple months ago. And in doing that, someone who was a high-profile former mayor of a small city in the state and also the president of that city's Chamber of Commerce posted on a friend's page, I will paraphrase, but there was a picture put of the Democratic female caucus that were all dressed in white. And to paraphrase, he put, looks like a bunch of female dogs in heat. And that's a person who is a high-profile person, who's a former mayor of a small city, who was the current president of their Chamber of Commerce, and is the father of the current mayor of that small city, who was also a lieutenant governor candidate this year. He is no longer the current president of that organization's Chamber of Commerce, right? So even when you think there's something that's out there that you're doing on a personal page or someone else's personal page, this incredible tool that lets me communicate with relatives in Ireland and Italy who I would never otherwise be able to communicate with is also an avenue for doing things that can lead to bad things, not just personally, but professionally. And so the thing to keep in mind is always, always, always know that there's a balance to this tool. And excuse my notes. I am not, and we were talking about this earlier, I'm not a believer in using PowerPoint and reading off the screen if I don't have to. I would love to show you some interesting pictures of tweets, and I'm going to refer to Twitter a lot because that's my thing. Facebook is I stay in touch with my family and my relatives. Instagram, I like putting up pictures of sometimes my kids. Most often, you're going to see a picture of my dog, who's a golden retriever, Finnegan. His middle name is officially on the AKC website, Shabazz, so Finnegan Shabazz Netchie. You know, those are personal things. Twitter is where I try, I'm probably on a little too often, quite frankly, so hopefully this isn't going back to my company's feed, but it's where I get news. Again, it's where I like to interact with people that have common interests, and it's where I think things can, you know, when I was in school, which seems like forever ago, and I know the people that are older than 37 years old are going to say 16 years ago was fantastic. I wish it was only 16 years since I left college. For you guys, I'm sure 16 years ago seems like forever ago. So the closest thing we had to social media when I was in school, we'd gotten past America Online, but there was this thing called America Online AIM Instant Messenger. It was awesome. It was the way it was kind of the Twitter of the day. So the extent was just posting messages and being able to connect to people instantly. So that's what I like about Twitter, is the ability to connect to people instantly. I think, you know, what I was going back to before with the pitfalls, I thank God every day that things like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram were not around in 2003. I think what you're going to deal with, and the world is changing so dramatically and at a quicker pace than it's ever changed before. There's stuff that students at this university are going to have to deal with going through their careers that your predecessors never had to deal with before. 10 years ago, it was real controversial if a presidential candidate admitted that they had smoked marijuana. That's going to become less of an issue, particularly in a state like Connecticut, which is probably going to legalize marijuana in the next 18 years. But I'm not naive, because I have a nephew at this school, my sister's a professor at this school, I have nephews and nieces in high school. Again, I don't even want to fathom what social media is going to be like when my kids are older. There are pictures, and there are just more open commentary now than has ever happened before. And so going back to my earlier point about when it's out there, it's out there. It's very easy for me professionally when I'm dealing with a case. If I want to learn if someone's been active, I can find out what their texts were with a subpoena. I can find out what's been tweeted. When you think something's been deleted, for the most part, there's been a screenshot of what you did if it was real controversial, and someone else is posting it as a picture. And so that's become something that's out there forever, and that's no longer in your control. So where I see this going, quite frankly, I talk to clients all the time about things like discrimination and sexual harassment. I think social media in that world is going to start defining what you guys will be dealing with in future years for your careers. The way people are interacting is changing at work. It used to be when you left work or you left school, you went home and you didn't really have to deal with anything until the next day. A lot of the case law, unfortunately, that we're dealing with that talks about social media and how it affects people with diversity, discrimination, harassment issues are in the school setting. Kids used to just be bullied and then they go home. Now kids are being bullied to the point where they're getting on social media and they never get away from it. And so there are lawsuits that are allowing for things like discrimination and again, sexual harassment that you never would have thought of before because of what people have put on their personal sites. If it comes back to the workplace or to school, it can lead to severe legal issues, and then you're calling up your fellow alum that next you to help you out, which I'd rather help out non-University of Connecticut students on issues like that, but so that's something to keep in mind. What I always talk to people about that I think, I usually talk about it outside of the social media setting, but I think it's very, very important and very applicable to what's going on today. There is an idea that, has anyone here heard of EQ? You guys know what EQ is? And my favorite saying is, it's not the IQ, it's the EQ. So we all know what IQ is, right? The EQ is the emotional equivalent of that. So something that's very important with what I do for a living is learning how to deal with people, how to respond to people, how to interact with people. I think what you see on social media a lot today is people think they're the smartest person in the room. They want to make a very clever comment. Sometimes it sounds better in your head than what you actually read or type out. And they want to think that they're this clever person that's going to get something out there without thinking about the ramifications of that, how it's going to affect someone, what it's going to mean for someone's response. Are you going to offend somebody? We have some people that think the world's too politically correct. Well, the world is what it is. And so we have to deal with, my favorite thing I like to tell my kids is stop worrying about things you can't control, worry about the things you can control. What you can control is your own personal behavior and how you deal with people. And so when I say it's not the IQ, it's the EQ, when you're using social media, and this is a way to help develop your career, you don't want to do anything now that's going to prevent you from getting a job 5 years from now or 10 years from now. You don't want to do anything 5 years into your career that's going to affect you becoming or advancing on that career ladder. And those are all things that are happening today. I wish I could say that people are given second chances all the time. Maybe they are. To a large extent, if you burn your bridges, you burn your bridges. And so what you want to do is, again, before you press send, click, before you text anything, first question is, what's this going to lead to before I actually do this? Am I going to offend someone? Is there going to be something I have to respond to? If you do hit the send button and it's something you probably shouldn't have done, next thing is, if you can quickly delete that, you do that. But how do I respond to this? And getting into an argument on Twitter, I can tell you, is not the best way to show your employer or your friends or your spouse that you're a mature person who made an accident and moved on, and you're kind of digging your ditch a little bit more. And so, getting back to EQ, I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I think being smart's overrated. That sounds probably not the best thing to say on a university campus, particularly one that gave me a degree, but I really believe that. For attorneys, generally anyone that's gotten their JD is relatively intelligent, although the little secret that most attorneys don't want to tell you is that we just decided to go to college for an additional 3 years. That's what I like to tell other attorneys when they are in depositions talking about things that are just not that important. But you really, really, really have to talk about how this is going to lead to the next steps and how you're dealing with people. My skill in life is how I'm dealing with people. And so when we're dealing with the workplace and where we're going with this, and I know this is kind of long-winded, but this is the way I work with the structure of my speech. I want to know that I'm someone that has the most common sense in the room. Not that I'm the brightest person in the room. For the most part, news, facts, these are things that are in books. These are things that you can get in a treatise, particularly in the law. That's what I tell people that I work with all the time. I want people that are going to, I know, have common sense, work really hard, and are responsible. Something we do, and we don't go hunting for our employees' personal information on social media, but before we hire someone, we do look at things like, what have they done on social media? If I'm going to have someone who's going to be responsible for my clients and what's being represented for my employer, and they have things that they've posted on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and one weren't consistent or bright enough to affect the security settings, but two, whoa, we don't need that. But two, did not show a level of maturity where I trust their judgment. That's something that's going to dictate whether I think I can trust you and there's someone that's going to be trainable in the workplace. And so, again, there's only so much. Social media is this huge thing. There's only so much I can talk to you about. That timer was 16 minutes just so I knew where I was in this. This isn't rocket science. If you're going to use social media, I think you should use it because, quite frankly, you'll find that your name or your company, someone's going to create a profile, whether or not you do. So I'm an advocate of having it just to make sure no one else can do it for you. But I'm also an advocate that if you're going to use it correctly. And so that means if you're going to have a brand and you're going to be consistent and you're going to be interesting to people, you have to use it regularly. I talk about things like Greater Hartford redevelopment and UConn athletics. You can go on and see my tweets probably 4 or 5 times a day. And yes, I look at some followers that it's at UConn Next, so you can look that up. But I try to talk about things that are topical. And does anyone, I was just telling Mr. Enright outside, does anybody remember Bob Diaco, or are you all fresh enough to thankfully not have that ingrained in your head? Okay, so the type of things I'll tweet about are, I was just on vacation in Florida, and I was visiting my parents, had my family with me. We were out on a boat, decided to go swimming, go see some dolphins, parked our boat on an island. Out of the blue, when we got back from seeing some dolphins, a boat comes flying up, and a man, handsome man, beautiful hair, beached his boat right next to ours. Had an interesting Iowa Hawkeyes tattoo. It was Bob Diaco. And so of all the places in the world, I can tell you the first thing I did was look at my parents and my wife and say, are we in a desert and am I hallucinating? But the second thing I did was go on Twitter and say, I can't make this up if I wanted to, and I can tell you I did not want to make this up, but Bob Diaco just beached his boat next to mine, and I have no idea what's going on. And that response, within about 45 seconds, had about 100 likes from people that were associated with UConn. And I can't mention certain things, like our friends at the time back asked what the name of the boat was, and they inserted another word in what the name of the boat was, but it was not civil conflict, I can tell you that. It was not beautiful New Jersey Italian hair, but you know, I'm a big believer in being clever, but staying topical. So even when I'm funny, I try to bring it back to what's going on. But that's not I wish that was a fake tweet that I could have made a joke about. That was a real thing. So again, I've spoken, said I didn't want to speak for 17 straight minutes. I've spoken for 17 straight minutes. You have on all my glory this wisdom of social media that's left for 3 more minutes, or for the hour and a half or 2 hours break. I'm here. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, comments? If you block me, let me know. Thank you.
So I'm representing the group of people that were born when Lyndon Johnson was president. Talk a little bit about, because I have my own thoughts about social media, and again, probably, so you saw Bob Diaco.
Yep.
I'll take this. Do you think you would have gotten more out of it if you didn't tweet about it? And kind of, I guess my point is, and I won't go to that specific thing, but I remember going to seeing a photo of American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown.
Yep.
And I'm a huge horse racing fan, and I follow a lot of horse racing on Twitter, but everyone's got their phone up taking a picture of American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown.
Good question.
Do you think you get more out of it if you just watched it yourself and had it ingrained in your memory forever?
So I'll tell you this. My 2 things. One, my dad was that 65-year-old guy that had a Yukon hat on when all this was happening, and walked up to him and acted like he wasn't there because he had a Yukon hat on, and just wanted to show that he had a Yukon hat on, right? And 2, during this, my mom was acting like she was looking at an email and was taking a picture of it. Me, I was taking it all in. And so I did not tweet about it until he had pushed off, because he looked up, his wife looked at us and started laughing, and within about 35 to 40 minutes, we were still there. They were moving off to different pastures somewhere near Louisiana Tech, but I digress.
Skip Bolt's another one.
Exactly. What you're saying is a great point. I see that, and that drives me crazy when I'm at concerts. You know, I love live music. I love going to see bands like The Roots and Pearl Jam, Dave Matthews Band. I was at a concert in Boston a couple weeks ago to see Damien Rice. Live music is tremendous, right? So when I'm there, I want the experience. It drives me crazy when people are taking pictures, because I've done that, especially early on when this was becoming real prevalent. And then I found myself like a week later saying, I'm deleting all these pictures that I don't have any need for. What do I need to see a picture for? I can go online and get a much better picture of the person. So I am a big believer in taking it all in. I do think, and I find this with a lot of younger people that I work with, and I feel really blessed because, again, I'm 37 years old. So I remember life before all of this happened, but I'm also young enough that I've kind of grown up with it and seen it. I've seen the highs and the lows and a lot of the changes. So I feel like it gives me a little bit more grounding than someone who's grown up with this. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to grow up now with all this. I think younger people, something to keep in mind, whatever you do in life, it doesn't matter if you're an attorney, you're a journalist, you're a marketer, you work behind a desk. Personal interactions are so underrated, and it's becoming a lost art. And so it's very easy when I talk to my associates that they like to email clients, and it drives me crazy. There's certain things, don't get me wrong, I have to email, especially when someone wants a quick response. Phone calls are better, and there is no substitute for face-to-face time. And I have clients that are based in Syracuse, New York, of all places, and I do have Yukon license plates, so when I drive there, I take pictures of my car there. It's a 4.5 or 8 hour round trip drive, basically. I get more business from that client after we've spent personal time together. So nothing else, enjoy this, but yes, enjoy life. It's way too short. If you're gonna enjoy it, you have to actually spend time living. So thank you very much for your time. That was a great question that I took too long to answer.
You're fine. Thank you, Matt. So students from across campus and from all disciplines have had their fair share of professional social media experience. In this roundtable, I'm going to sit with 3 UConn students to discuss how they found success in social media both professionally and personally. Our student panel consists of Kaylee Townsend. Kaylee is a communication student in the NCLAS who will be walking across campus floor this May. During her time in stores, she was the manager of our campus radio station and worked at University Communications as a digital media content producer. Outside of campus, she was a campus brand ambassador for Aerie, and currently she lives in Harvard working for the municipality as a digital marketing and events intern. Our next student is Alexis Angelini. She's a junior double majoring in English and Communications as well as minoring in women's and gender sexuality studies. She's originally from the Philadelphia area. She has worked with brands including Aerie, Rent the Runway, Zipcar, Neutrogena, Bigelow Tea, Velcro, Go Puff, and more. She manages the social media pages for several companies and understands what it means to be a brand ambassador. She hopes to continue working in the branding and marketing social media fields once she completes college. And finally, we have Amma. She's our 4th-year student studying molecular and cell biology and communication. When not working as a social media content producer for University Communications, she's heavily involved on campus. She most recently served as the undergraduate student body president at Stores. Her love and interest for social media is reflected in her experience as she currently serves as the campus coordinator for Rent the Runway, runs a self-started Twitter account with more than 60,000 followers, and works with Aerie as a brand ambassador. Let's welcome them to the stage. Thank you guys for joining me. So why don't we start by having you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your experience. I know I touched on it, but I'll have you guys elaborate a little bit more.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Kaylee. I'm so excited to walk across the stage in May. Have that countdown on my phone. Super excited. So just to introduce myself, I'm a communication women's studies minor student, and my experience with social media actually started with University Communications when I joined the team as a digital media content producer, and I was so excited to not show my identity and just go to student events and say, oh yeah, I'm the one taking photos, and my love for it has grown to the point where I became an ambassador for Aerie. I worked at WHUS right upstairs, fulfilled my love for multimedia in that facet, and now I'm actually taking all of my experience now and working for the city of Hartford as a digital media intern, and it's awesome because I'm now actually working on the rebranding of a new growing city, so been able to take advantage of all the great stuff that I've learned here as a student and a professional.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexis Angelini. I'm an English and Communications double major and a gender studies minor. I started doing brand ambassadorships the summer of my sophomore year, and I haven't really stopped since. Here at UConn, so I worked with companies like Aerie, Neutrogena, Velcro, Rent the Runway, The Economist, Go Puff, a bunch of them, so I'm just excited to continue that. And I've learned a bunch of it from content creation and kind of across different mediums, so adding photographs for Instagram or just making it into words for a tweet or something like that, so kind of just twisting it.
Hi everyone, my name is Amma Pia. As mentioned before, I am a 4th-year student here at the university. I'm a molecular and cell biology and communication double major. I'm also graduating in May, so I have that countdown alongside you, Kaylee. It's been really fun, yeah. So my journey with social media started when I was about 14. When Twitter came along, I think around 2011 was when I started, and it wasn't enough for me to just have my own personal Twitter account, so I took a love that I had for One Direction. Sounds silly, but I did. And I created an update account because I said, why not? I can't settle for just having one account, right? So I did that, and I ended up growing it, and I'm currently at about 60,000 followers, which is really crazy to me that people are so interested to see in seeing like what I have to say about the band and what the band is doing and what their whereabouts are. But from that, I was able to work with the American Music Awards. The Associated Press follows the account, Yahoo News UK follows the account too, and so through that, I was really able to learn a lot about trends, data analytics, what people want to see, how people want to engage with the content I post. And because I've been doing that for a number of years now, it kind of led me into this whole social media realm. And I became very involved in becoming a brand ambassador for Aerie and American Eagle. I'm currently the campus coordinator for The Runway, and I work for University Communications as a social media content producer, and I hope that I can continue doing this after I leave here, so yeah, that's all.
That's fantastic. You guys are definitely outshining me when I was in college, so you have that going for you. So why social media? What got you interested in all that those platforms have to offer?
So why social media? I think I was an internet kid, and I jokingly say this as a joke, where I remember, and my mom's here to also say yes to this, to agree to this, but I remember when I created a Facebook account and a Twitter account, and I wasn't allowed to, and I remember getting in trouble for it, and I totally understand the reasoning now, and I'll probably explain that later about privacy issues, and I'm so grateful to actually understand that from a young age, but I think I always wanted to get in touch and understand what was going on, and so I wanted to work in social media in some way, and also I'm more of a band music nerd, so before I worked in radio, I had a Tumblr account, which I made into a website on updating people on new band news, and that was my first publication. It's still on, if you creep hard enough, you can find it. It's the Kaleidoscope Press. And so I just wanted to grow into social media and learn how to use it so well so I can communicate with people. I like talking, so it all worked out.
I'm right there with you. I like sharing stories and whatnot, and I think it's also fun where like Instagram's kind of like my favorite one, where you can like draw and be creative, and that's something that like I've been missing since like taking art classes in like middle school or whatever. Like, it's not what I'm doing here. It's not what I did in high school. So it's kind of a fun way to like inform your friends, to like learn what's going on, to follow people all across the globe, and like to learn. Really, there's a bunch of different ways to use social media, and I like to use it in a positive way. So.
For me, I think we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, where we have had the very unique opportunity where we know what life was like before social media, and now we know what it's like afterwards. And yes, I'm a bit younger, so we don't have that much like experience with AOL and all of those things. But for me, it was very interesting to see how fast we all became accustomed to social media and how it's become integrated in almost everything we do. So it's not just, the original intent was to connect with your friends, just to kind of see what's going on with your family, right? But now it's brought into the world of business and politics and just understanding each other in those realms, and it all intersects. And I think it's so interesting to kind of see everyone's personalities in different worlds. So let's say, the business world, like connecting with people in that way to sell a product is different from talking to someone about what's going on in our political climate today and kind of pushing out a certain message, right? And so I think social media is so unique, so intersectional, and it's not something that people expected to kind of, I think, take off like that and to be so ingrained in what we do every day. And so for me, coming from, starting a One Direction account when I was 14, right, to now where I'm using it to talk about my platform and like what I would do here at UConn, also while talking about the platform of UConn as a higher education institution through University Communications, or talking about a brand and using my platform for that. It's just very interesting to see the growth and to kind of see my growth in that as well. So that's why for me I think social media is really great and really fun, interesting.
I know all of you guys are brand ambassadors, or have been brand ambassadors, or are going to be brand ambassadors. But could you kind of tell us how some of those started? Did you reach out to them? How did you build that relationship? What do you think it was about your social platforms that really got them interested in working with you?
Right, so I remember seeing that Aerie was doing brand ambassadorships on campus through AMA, and then actually Alexa's partnering up. So I was like, that's so cool. I wear Aerie, and it follows with my personal values. And so when I saw it and communicated with everyone, I saw that they were having an opening, and I said, well, I want to get involved with this. And it was a great experience. I only did it for a semester, but I found, actually, it's maybe different, but I love the experience that I had with Aerie as an ambassador, but I realized that I actually like social media more for professional and personal, and actually being behind the scenes, rather than actually being the ambassador itself. So while it was awesome to say I'm part of this mission, which I totally love and still align myself with, I found actually what I love about being a professional in social media and new digital realm. So posting, part of area, probably you all can agree with this, is that we do have to post on a regular basis and kind of wear the product and be ambassadors on our campus and align with other women and other people who identify as women on campus and shoot the mission out and say, hey, we're here for you and this is what the area mission is for. But on the flip side, as a person, as a student, and a growing professional, I was like, you know what, I actually like working for the UConn account. I like doing that. That's really awesome. I like being behind the scenes, and also I found now working for the city of Hartford that being using social media as creative as that and connecting to residents and people in these different neighborhoods. I'm using it very strategically, and I think I really personally like that part of social the best.
So cool. So after I had did the area one was my first ambassadorship, so after that I was kind of just like loving the lifestyle, getting like, at the time I got free products for area. I'm not sure what they're doing now, but getting paid to promote a brand that I love, getting to meet someone like Iskra Lawrence and getting to hang out with her and things like that. So I was kind of just plugging into Google all the time, like UConn opportunities for brand ambassadorships, or I'd go to like conferences. I'm in a club called Her Campus. We have like Her Conference, which is like social media influencers meet there, and PR, and people from like Cosmopolitan and Elle and different publications and things like that. So just kind of learning tips and tricks from them. Like ed2010.com has a lot of ambassadorships and journalism and other positions. So kind of just like searching and even going after brands and saying like, I've worked with these brands in the past, this is what I can do for you, I can create content. And I kind of like being upfront, is like sometimes that can be scary and a little bit nerve-wracking, but at the same time, it's really nice to connect with people, as you were saying, regardless if it's up front or even behind the screen.
So I actually became involved with my first brand ambassadorship through ARI, and it was because I was a blogger for Her Campus for a few years, and someone had posted in the Facebook group. They were like, oh, like I am a graduate from UConn, and I now work for Her Campus, and we're currently looking for ambassadorships for ARI through Youth Marketing Connection. And so at the time, I was only a molecular and cell biology major, so I was like, I don't think they're gonna want this, but okay, we'll just go for it. And so I applied, and then about a week or so later, they got back to me asking for an interview, and then I got the position within a month or so. And I was shocked because I was like, a science major doing fashion. I will see how this goes. But they took the chance on me, and I got an amazing opportunity, and I learned a lot about myself in the process. And what's so funny is that I gained a lot more confidence in how I promote myself and like project myself on social media, because for a number of years, right, for me, right, it was kind of flipped for us, right? So I was behind the screen talking about One Direction and what they were doing, and just talking about their lives and like all kind of convey their messages. But then now the script flipped, and it was on me, and it was like, what's my message? How do I incorporate brands into what I'm doing? And how do they reflect what I believe and value, right? And so it's very different. And I was someone who posted on social media maybe like once every 3 months. I'd be like, hello, like, remember me, you know, I'm back. But now it's like I have to do it more frequently because of, you know, the different brands that I'm a part of. But I love it. I actually love it so much because I can show all the different sides of me, and social media allows me to express myself in that way and show, it helps me to help others talk about their messages, but also interconnect it with my message and kind of help me to be confident in who I am. But then at the same time, I'm helping others be confident in themselves, because I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, you know, you talk about area on campus, and you're a Black woman, and you are someone who talks about women empowerment, things like that, and I can see myself in you because you promote that message. And for me, that's just so touching, because I can use social media, and social media is something that, you know, it could be good or bad. It has different connotations, right? And so for me to be able to use social media to reflect myself and what I value in order to help other people to feel confident in themselves is really cool. So yeah, that's like my long-winded answer. Yes, it was my first ambassadorship was through ARI, and it was very, again, I was a science major, so who knew? But a lot can come out of these things if we try.
What have some of the challenges been with the ever-changing landscape of social media? I mean, when you started, at least your Twitter account, Instagram wasn't a thing. So how has that evolved for you guys?
Yeah, sure. Well, so definitely when I started using social media, Selena Gomez did not have 147 million followers, nor did I think Ariana Grande would surpass that and become the most followed person on social media, which is, it's crazy to me. But that alone shows you how much emphasis we place on social media and how we are using it, and it shows how, like, what we want to see, right? It's definitely changed even within the last even 2 years or so, right? So my journey with social media started when I was 14, but even within like the past 2 years, with the change in our political climate and the conversations that we're now having, it has changed how we use social media. And now people are talking about news sources, fake news sources, what's real, what's not, talking about what should be censored, what shouldn't be censored, talking about free speech and all of those things. Now those conversations are really brought to the forefront. When I started, it was a lot more focused on, privacy and, cyberbullying and things like that. And those conversations are still relevant, but now the conversation has really shifted to, we're not only impacting, our words don't just impact others, but it's now like, it's impacting others on a larger scale. Now we're talking about a whole group of people. Now we're talking about a race or religion, things like that. And so that's something that, I didn't expect to see, especially at 14. Like, you're not really thinking about those things, but at 21 now, because you've grown older and you're more involved in those things, it changes your perspective, right? And so it's very interesting to see that shift. And I'm kind of excited to see where it goes from here, because I think it's still so controversial, and I think we still have a lot to learn and gain from learning. But yeah, that's for me what the biggest shift has been.
One thing I think that's a little disappointing, I would say, was everything that's going on recently with, not recently, but people who feel the need that they need to alter themselves or promote things like appetite suppressant lollipops and just products that you really shouldn't be sharing. And if you're talking about being an influencer, I don't really like that term, but I think that as Jenna Kutcher said, if you know who she is, she's a businesswoman. Anyone, no matter if you have 2 followers, 100 million, you have an influence. So I think that one thing is disappointing is, the promoting the images of being so perfect on social media, I think keeps getting heightened, and it's something that I'm trying to myself kind of show people that it's okay to just be real. On my Instagram profile, it's this is to highlight reel. I'm just posting the good things. I'm not always posting when I'm having a meltdown after an exam or something like that. So I hope that it gets a little bit more real, and I hope people stop trying to Photoshop themselves and kind of just put out the real them. So.
I think my personal internal challenges that I think about with growing landscape of social media is double. It's actually triple. It's the privacy element. There is the personal, kind of divulging personal, which goes into privacy, of course, and then kind of the fake news, trying to eliminate what is social literacy and media literacy. And maybe this is the communication major research person talking, but I think about media literacy when I post or I come across things and I read a tweet that may not actually be what's actually going on. Say something about the academic scandals that came out yesterday, and I'm trying to say, wait, okay, so what actually happened? So I had to read through the 23-letter federal prosecution document and go, okay, now I understand. Now I don't need to go on Twitter to actually understand what someone's interpreting as being right. And I think that takes a level of literacy that I kind of hope for everyone to have at a certain point too, as we move forward and looking through fake accounts, meme accounts. And you think, I watched that Fire documentary on Netflix and Hulu, and while it may seem like an entertainment piece, it's actually expressing something that's really happening, and it's showing that this growing landscape is actually harmful in a way, because people will believe something to the point where they'll spend thousands of dollars and go to an event and be stranded, all because Kendall Jenner posted a photo of this. And so I think as influencers growing, we should all be mindful of that. And I like to also be mindful of that as well. And then going to kind of the privacy, putting all of your personal information out there. And I've kind of internally thought about that lately when I'm talking to friends and I'm like, you know what? Actually, I think Finstas are awesome. I think having 2 accounts is awesome because you know what? People can actually divulge things. And then a week later I said, you know what? No, they're bad. You know what? We shouldn't be divulging that much of personal information. And I'm kind of in a tie because I'm also 23 who also just decided like Instagram is awesome. I'm just growing with it. So I think I probably wouldn't know my fullest extent on my answer until a few years after the internet has grown and shaped itself too, a little further.
What has been the best social media advice you've gotten?
Don't post about your siblings on social media. That's the biggest thing. But that's on a personal level. It's just like, I've always tried to maintain on my Twitter, if you follow me at Townsend, you will see that I love being really funny and coming up with funny things to say, or little like tickers, but the biggest advice I think professionally has been always be as real as possible though. Maintain that level of your voice, and that goes with being a professional and working for brands, always having a unique voice that's when someone reads that they go, that's Kaylee who is working on behalf of UConn, or that's Kaylee who's working on behalf of the city of Hartford, and that's her like very pure and unique voice.
Yeah, I would definitely say personal branding, but another one I would say is just don't take it too seriously. After all, it's just social media. Like, everyone's creating content. At the end of the day, it just should be for fun. Like, don't get too caught up in like likes and posts and all that kind of stuff because there's algorithms, and at the end of the day, like, people talk in real life. Like, not everything has to be online.
I would definitely say it kind of just goes back to the personal branding thing. You know, it's very interesting to see how much your online presence defines you, even though you might not want it to, but people use it as the definition of who you are, and that's just because again of where we started with social media, and now where we are at now. So I've really taken into account that even if I'm posting a photo of, I don't even know, like just me at dog lane or something, like that's telling someone, oh, this girl likes to go to dog lane. So be careful, like, you know, my point is like be careful with what you post, you know, right? So, you know, regardless of what you might think, people have a perception of you, and so what you put out there, that contributes to that perception. And so I'm very cautious of what I put, and that doesn't mean I'm not free to do whatever I want to do, but it's also a matter of I have the control, I get to control the narrative here, right? So if you want to have a positive perception of you, make sure that's what you're putting out there. If that's the real you, then that's what you should be putting out there. And that's what people are going to take you for. That's why people, when they, you know, when you're applying for jobs, they look at your social media profile because it tells a lot about you, if that's what you want it to be, right? But regardless of that, people are going to take that as a definition. So that's definitely the best advice I've ever gotten, is just to be careful with your personal brand.
Wonderful. So what is next for you guys? Is it full-time social media? Is this just going to be a thing you do for fun? What does that look like for you guys?
I'll joke because I'm thinking May 12th, 2019, what happens? So social media, I think, of course, will be part of my professional career and personal career, of course. Well, personal branding. I look to pursue a job more in digital marketing, but more in the analytics. That's what I'm looking to go to grad school for, and to see kind of why people think, and that's definitely the UConn Research One institution in me, but I go Huskies. But it's the wanting to think what's beneath social media and how these algorithms work, and why does this person come up first on your social media every time you log into Instagram, but definitely what data is, and I think big data is so interesting. So that's me professionally in social media in the next 5 to 10 years, but you never know, the landscape is always going to shift, so will I.
Yeah, I'm definitely not opposed. There's so many different paths you can go to with social media and content creation. I'm an English major at NCOM, so I used to really be into writing articles all the time, and I've kind of shifted away from writing all these pages of articles and things like that to now telling stories through social media. So I've been working with a couple brands managing their Instagram accounts, so I hope to do marketing and brand work in some capacity. After I graduate, I'm a junior, so I have a little bit of time, but we'll see.
I feel like I always just get this question, and I always feel like I'm at like Thanksgiving dinner table with my aunts and uncles asking, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I have no idea. But for me, I'm also very interested in like the data side, the trends and analytics side as well. But that's just the science major in me. Like I'm just a STEM person, but I also love creativity, and I love how social media has allowed me to have the best of both worlds. And so I hope to pursue anything that's related to digital marketing, marketing research, or anything like that after college. But I also am interested in starting potentially my own business and just working a lot on content creation and building up my own personal brand on the side. I'm like starting a YouTube channel, and I'm doing all those things, and I'm really excited about it because it's a way to express myself. And so yeah, I hope I get to do both, and I hope that it is successful.
Fantastic. I'm sure you guys will more than succeed in all of that. Do we have any questions for any of these girls?
I can just talk loud if you want.
That works there.
Okay, so I run social media for WHUS Radio.
And the Women's Center, and I noticed that a lot of times, like when I'm working with social media and I'm also spending a lot of time on social media, it becomes very toxic. And if I wasn't working in social media, I could just take a break, but like because I can't. So like, how do y'all kind of manage that toxicity that comes from like comparing yourself to others and being like, oh, this person's Instagram is so much better, like they have so many followers, like stuff like that.
I guess I'll go first, but for me, I literally have my days where I'm just like not checking. Even when I post, this is hard to believe, but when I post, I turn off my notifications, so I don't see who likes my post. I don't see the number until maybe days after, and I'll be like, oh, like that's nice, like I got likes. Because you're right, like at some point, it's a numbers game, and then you value your self-worth on those numbers and what other people are doing in social comparison. And so just doing little things like that, I feel helps me to kind of compartmentalize like what my social media life is, what my job is and what my personal life is, and how I'm projecting that as well. So I know for me, it's a matter of, just literally if I have to, like the limit thing on your phone where you can like limit the apps. For me, I'm very strict about it because I know myself. So I'm like, do not go on there, not Instagram, not today. But yeah, it's just a matter of knowing that, like having that awareness about yourself. It's self-awareness and just understanding that, like what you want to put out there, knowing what you are as a person. And if you know that that's something that could be toxic, just trying to be able to separate that and also be around people who will help you to do that as well and encourage you to also separate that.
But yeah, I totally understand that. I'm posting at least 2 pictures for like other accounts or whatever every day, so I'm scrolling through and like commenting, and I 100% feel like that too. Like I'm never getting a break from this. Like I'm on here. So for my personal account, because I like to like scroll my personal one too, I follow only like body positive people who I think are inspiring, people who I know like are gonna support me and like aren't gonna judge me or whatever, like people who aren't gonna make me like, yeah, everyone has those bad days where I'm still gonna compare myself, but they're not going to invoke that on purpose or have like these false like fake advertisements of themselves kind of on their page. So I try to combat it with that, and just like kind of how Amma said, like sometimes I just like turn my phone off, I like put it across the room, like just go on my laptop or something like that, or just like try to like read a book or just like decompress, because it's at the end of the day, it's just an app.
I totally agree with both of your stories too. Hi Mark, fellow Whistler. But I think something that I've done personally recently is use the mute button. And I think they put that there for a reason. And I think, well, I love using Instagram for my own personal and like getting really like digital and playing with GIFs and GIFs, I don't know. But what I've taken advantage of is the mute button and unfollowing too, because while it may seem not threatening, but maybe inconvenient for someone, and they go, Kaylee, why don't you follow me anymore? And I'm like, well, you know what? We still talk, we're still texting, but maybe our social media, it doesn't have to be that we have to connect on that. And I think I've gained a lot of respect for friends who've also said that for me, especially when I was a brand ambassador, and I was constantly flooding feeds and getting feedback from friends who were like, Kaylee, come on. Like, please, I had to mute you. And I've learned that I also had to mute other people too, and maybe unfollow, because it helps my mental health at the end of the day. I sometimes just really like going on my Instagram and seeing dogs and being like, you know what, that coffee place looks really great. Not something that I would invoke something that feels negative. And that's my therapist's advice, so I'm just gonna project it too.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start our next session. We have someone here from Travelers who's going to talk about hiring on social media and how that plays a role. So if you think that hiring committees don't look at your social profiles when they're looking to hire you, think again. Your online footprint is the first impression you'll give to most employers, and your social presence could hinder your chances of being hired. Today we have Heather with us to discuss how to tweak and polish your social media presence and to make you hireable and desirable. Heather is the Senior Director of Social Media Marketing at Travelers, where she leads the Enterprise Digital Marketing Department's efforts in social media. With over a decade of experience, she has worked and hired for brands like Google, Stylecaster.com, Elizabeth Arden, and more. As someone newly hired and who is currently hiring, Heather brings firsthand tips and advice on how to build your social presence to stand out from the rest and land the gig. Please help me welcome Heather. Hi guys, how are you?
Hello.
Hi. I am really excited to be here. Oh, I have to remember to hold this in front of my face, okay? I'm really excited to be here today, especially as somebody who just went through the hiring process. I've been at Travelers for 5 whole weeks now. And I'm also currently hiring in my role and looking for summer interns. So if anybody is interested in a summer internship, my email's up here. And my last name's D'Amico, so I know it's a little hard to pronounce. So if anybody's interested in applying, email me your resume and remember these tips I'm about to walk you through. Okay, so raise your hand if you have Facebook. Okay, Instagram, Twitter. You're gonna get an arm workout. LinkedIn. Okay, Snapchat. Okay, last one, Venmo. Okay, so you might be wondering why I say Venmo. Well, you have to remember that Venmo is a public domain, so unless you set your profile to private or friends only, anything you put on there can be seen by anybody. So that goes for all social networks as well, so keep this in mind when applying for jobs because hiring managers do look at this, look at your social presence. For example, 70% of employers use social networking sites to research job candidates during the hiring process. 47% of employers say that if they can't find a job candidate online, they are less likely to call that person in for an interview. So having a social media presence does make you stand out, and I will talk through how to build your online brand throughout this presentation. But you must be cognizant of what you post and remember to update your privacy settings because you don't want hiring managers to see this. This is Venmo, so be careful what you put on Venmo because you don't want hiring managers to see this on your Venmo. All right, so as a hiring manager, these are the most significant things I consider when screening candidates on social media. Excuse me.
Does the information online support the candidate's qualifications for the job? Does that candidate have an online persona? What are other people posting about the candidate? And is there a reason not to hire them? Let's take a deeper dive into each one. Sorry. Information that supports the candidate's qualifications for the job. When I'm screening candidates' social media presence, I'm always asking myself, are they prominently shown in Google searches? Whether it be blogs, websites, social media pages, image searches, projects or awards. Also, candidates should have up-to-date, clear, and concise job descriptions on LinkedIn. This makes it easy for hiring managers to get a good snapshot of the candidate's experience and see if it aligns with the job description. So you can see some examples here. I just gave a quick snapshot of what shows up when you Google my name. So you can see the first thing that pops up is my LinkedIn, my Twitter. So you could say I'm pretty prominently shown in a Google search when you type in my name. Also, this is an example of somebody's LinkedIn experience. So what I like about this is that it's short, but it's very clear, concise. This is a hiring manager. When I'm looking at somebody's LinkedIn, I don't want to see these paragraphs and paragraphs of information, just because, you know, I'm busy as a hiring manager, and I just want to be able to glance at somebody's page and really grasp the candidate's experience. So having these clear, concise descriptions is ideal. Next, determine if the candidate has an online persona. So do they have a personal brand? What's their level of creativity? Do they have a professional profile, photo, and bio? Do they show a variety of interests? Does the candidate show their personality? And this is really important because hiring managers want to know if the candidate will be a good culture fit. Lastly, hiring managers do look at the number of followers, but I wouldn't say this is a make it or break it. You know, it is good to see if somebody has a robust following, but it's not something that I'm gonna, you know, if somebody doesn't have a large following, it's not like I'm not gonna hire them because of that. So here are some examples. Austin has a really nice LinkedIn profile here. He has a professional profile photo that shows personality. He has a nice relevant background photo, which I'm pretty sure that's him in the photo in the back. He has a clearly defined role and company, and he also has an informative professional summary. So what I like about this is, again, it's not super long. It's, you know, not paragraphs on paragraphs, but it's clear, concise, and informative. And then I just gave an example of my Twitter page. So my Twitter page is professional, promotes the company, but yet also shows some of my interests, which, yes, I admit I like White Castle, which I have a weird story about White Castle and somebody sending crave cases to my office, but that's for another time. And obviously I love my dog, Ray. It's also important for hiring managers to see what other people are posting about the candidate, specifically on LinkedIn. As a candidate, you want to make sure you proactively request endorsements from people you trust and who are reputable themselves. And this goes without saying, but make sure you receive thoughtful recommendations from professors, managers, colleagues, coworkers, etc., and that you give thoughtful recommendations to others. So again, here are some examples I'm sharing. This is on my LinkedIn page here, so you can see I received endorsements, and it's definitely a plus if they're from people who are highly skilled in that area. You can also see some recommendations here. They're pretty thoughtful from some of my former managers and colleagues. And then you can also see that I've given 11 recommendations, and you have to also just keep that in mind because hiring managers can see the recommendations that you give other people. So you want to make sure those are also well thought out, you know, proper grammar is being used, good writing style, so keep that in mind as you're writing recommendations for others. Lastly, hiring managers always look to see if there's a reason not to hire the candidate. These are just some examples. Most of these are not surprising. Provocative, inappropriate content, discriminatory comments, linked to criminal behavior, lied about qualifications, poor communication skills. This is actually one of my biggest pet peeves. Just being in social media, communications, journalism, I'm always looking at people's grammar, writing style. So definitely keep that in mind when you're building out your social media presence. Also, badmouth previous employer and coworkers. That's definitely a big no-no. So if a hiring manager sees that you're blasting your company or coworkers on social media, that's most likely not a candidate I would want to be working for me. Also, social media handle was unprofessional. So, sometimes when you're in middle school, high school, you think a handle might be funny or an inside joke, and then down the road, you're ready to get a job, and hiring managers don't think it's so funny. So always keep that in mind when actually creating your handle. Now let's talk about how you should use social media to get the gig. And I'll tell you a little story about myself. So growing up as a kid, it was my lifelong dream to live and work in New York City. And even, my parents had somebody come and paint the New York City skyline on my bedroom wall for my 10th birthday. So it was just a huge dream of mine. And I'm from Columbus, Ohio. So, it was always a big dream to live in the big city. So throughout high school, college, I worked numerous jobs to start saving money. In college, I worked numerous internships. And then while I was in college, this thing called social media started becoming a thing. Nobody really knew what it was. This platform called Twitter came about. And I think I was probably a sophomore or junior in college. And I was like, I'm gonna start using this thing, I'm gonna see what it's about. And as I started using Twitter, I realized that there was an opportunity for me to start connecting and networking with industry professionals in New York City. So I started using it, started following a lot of industry professionals in New York City, started engaging with them, tweeting, and also back when Twitter first started, Twitter chats was a big thing. So I was pretty active in weekly Twitter chats, like industry Twitter chats, things like that. So over the course of about 2 years, I really worked on growing my Twitter network of New York City professionals. So when it came time for me to graduate, I realized, okay, I built up this network, so let me start taking some of these connections offline and building those relationships offline and in person. So after I graduated, I took a few trips to New York and actually met up with some of these people I had built this network with on Twitter, did some informational interviews, met up for coffee, things like that, and kind of started making a name for myself. And then about a year after I graduated, I booked a one-way flight to New York and packed a suitcase and lived in a hotel and gave myself 1 month to find a job and find an apartment. And luckily within 3 weeks, through my Twitter network, I was able to land a job and found roommates and an apartment. So I just wanted to share this story because it just kind of shows the power of social media and how you can leverage it to really achieve your goals. So with that said, here are some of my biggest takeaways from my experience that I wanted to share with you. So first, identify a specific professional goal or goals. So mine was move to New York City, but yours could be working at Google or becoming an influencer or becoming an entrepreneur, creating your own company. But it's really important to identify that specific goal so you can start planning and building out your brand. Second, you want to be proactive and resourceful. So like I said, in my experience, following industry people and topics, proactively reach out to industry people and network. participate in the conversation. Third, identify your personal brand. So in thinking about your personal brand, take into consideration tone and voice. Do you want to be witty, intellectual, honest, soft-spoken, a risk taker, opinionated? What's going to portray your personality best? Communication skills. So again, use of proper grammar, your social media etiquette, creative use of emojis. And then also visual aesthetics. So thinking back to your professional profile photos, and then also the type of imagery and video that you want to create and share on your social channels. So thinking about what's the look and feel, what's the vibe you're going for, even thinking about the kinds of tones you want to use, or do you want to go with warm tones or cool tones? Just, thinking about your whole visual aesthetic. Also think about your audience. So the types of accounts people you are following and engaging with, and then also the people that are following you and engaging with you. You want to start building a quality audience. And then last but not least is content strategy. So being authentic stands true when thinking about your own social content strategy. We know that over the last few years, social platforms have really started adjusting their algorithms to focus on engaging in authentic content, and they will start rewarding that within the feeds. So definitely keep this in mind when strategizing what type of content you want to be creating and sharing on your personal social channels, because it could be prominently shown in feeds and then therefore more searchable and more likely to be seen by hiring managers. So to expand on content strategy a bit further, I recommend following the 50-30-20 rule. So when strategizing your content, dedicate 50% to curation, 30% to creation, and 20% to humanization. Curation is sharing content that is relevant and specific to your industry and will indicate you have your finger on the pulse of what's happening. 30% creation. You want to create authentic, engaging content to grow a quality audience. And then humanization. This brings your personal brand to life and shows that you're not a robot. So again, portraying your personality, your sense of humor, your interests, things like that. So the biggest takeaway for creating your personal brand is be yourself. To be fully transparent, hiring managers. This is not a fake it till you make it thing. Hiring managers are going to be able to identify the fakers. So definitely be yourself, be your true authentic self. These are just some examples of some of my friends actually in the industry who I really like their social feeds. Cami was actually one of my very first hires back in the day when I was working on the agency side. And Cami now runs social for ASOS's US social channels. So you can see she has a really nice visual aesthetic. You can get a sense of her personality. She likes pizza and pasta. And she also reps her brand. She's posting about ASOS on here, so I think this gives a good example of a good personal brand. And then my friend Stacy was actually my first roommate in New York City that I met through my Twitter connections. And Stacy runs marketing strategy and communications for Adobe. So you can see she has a nice Twitter feed here, shows some of her personality into her family life, also repping her brand, and just gives, good insight into her and, her personality and her personal brand. So these are just some examples that I wanted to share. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'm good? Okay. So questions? Okay, yeah. I don't know if anybody has questions or not, but.
Anyone have questions?
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. Our next speaker for our UConn Social Day lineup is a familiar face to some UConn fans. He is a native of Shelton, Connecticut. He enrolled at UConn in the fall of 2001. He was a 4-year starter quarterback for UConn and was the face of the team in the 2000s as UConn transitioned from a D1 AA to a member of the Football Bowl subdivision. He led UConn to a victory over Indiana in the dedication game of Frenchler Field in 2003 and the school's first ever bowl game, a win over Toledo in 2004 Motor City Bowl. He still holds the school records for pass completions, attempts, yardage, touchdown passes, and total yardage. He was selected by the Detroit Lions in the 5th round of the 2005 NFL Draft and played for 12 seasons in the league for 4 different teams before retiring in 2017. Dan Orlovsky now works as an analyst for ESPN, covering the NFL and college football. Please help me welcome Dan Orlovsky.
Yes, it is true that UConn was really good at football one time. I was here for that, so thank you for the introduction. I am excited to be here back on campus and kind of share some of my, I guess, social media experience. I find it a little ironic that I'm talking about social media in a way because when I was in college, the only social media we had was like, AOL Instant Messenger type stuff. So we didn't have what it is nowadays. I am by no means a social media savant, but my relationship with it certainly is very unique and is kind of catapulted or certainly sprung me into where I stand nowadays post being a player. So first I'll share with you guys kind of how social media benefited me transitioning from player to where I stand nowadays with ESPN and kind of how I use it now, still kind of relevant to my life today. I retired from the NFL after my 12th year in September of 2017. It was just time for me to be done as a player, and football season had already started. I was not really active on social media at this time. I think I probably had like 500 Instagram followers. No offense if that's where some people sit nowadays, and I had maybe 1,000 Twitter followers. I was the guy who thought social media was stupid. I honestly did. I was like, social media is not my thing. It's not something I want to be involved in. And when I got done playing, I'm not wired to just kind of sit and do nothing. And I knew I'd want to get into television and be part of an analyst broadcast world. And so I was having a conversation with a friend and saying, I know no network is going to call me. Football season had already started. And he was like, you just have to figure out a way to kind of differentiate yourself, figure out what your niche is, and kind of capitalize on it. And so it was a Sunday night. I was at home. This is probably early October of 2017. I'm at home just hanging out watching football with my wife. And it is the Panthers playing the Dolphins on television. And a play happens near the end of the game. Without boring you guys into like details, that was super cool to me, like as a football person. And I'm listening to the broadcast, and no one's talking about, kind of why the play happened or how the play happened. And it was a touchdown pass that Cam Newton had kind of changed the play before the ball was snapped type thing. And I just was going to my wife like, that was super cool. I wish people could understand how cool that was. And my wife was like, you should just make a video and put it on the internet. Immediately I was like, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. And so I just sat down, typically like we do in our relationship, and about 3 or 4 minutes later I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. So I went up to the television, I muted the television, I turned my phone horizontal, and I just played the television back and kind of pressed pause and play and broke the play down for people, like just using my finger and kind of guiding people's eyes to where to look and explaining what happened. And I posted it on Twitter and Instagram, and I went to bed, did not think much of it. And woke up, and it had gone viral. And in that moment, I was like, that's my niche. That's how I can kind of differentiate myself. That's how I can get my name out there and kind of educate people or prove people like, yeah, this dude knows what he's talking about, and kind of build my repertoire with that. And so for like the next 2 or 3 months during football season, I just really started to dive in and doing that, whether it was live games, or I would go back on the internet and watch the games after they had happened, and I just started to break football plays down, kind of utilizing my skill set, what I had been brought up in and learned for 20 years or so, and tried to continue to do that and kind of hone this craft. And it kind of grew and grew and grew. And what happened was I learned some of the traits of social media that were important, at least for my growth. When I posted a video, I never just posted a video. I always made sure I tagged people that I felt relevant. Whether if I made a video, I see a Lions sweatshirt, I have no idea how that happened out in stores, but I had played for 7 years with the Lions, so I went to start breaking down Lions plays. And if I would post a video, I never just like put a video on Twitter. Like I would always post writers in the local Detroit area that I knew had Twitter followers, to hopefully that they would retweet it. I would post the players that were involved in the play. I would tag their names and stuff like that. And so what happened was Twitter, and I don't really do a ton on Instagram, but Twitter became a weapon for me. And it became this weapon that I used to spread like wildfire. And so I don't say this in a bragging way by any means, but again, I stated that when I started this, I had like 1,000 Twitter followers. I think it sits at like 70,000 now, strictly because the strategic way I went about making these videos and trying to tag people with the right way. So I guess a couple of things that I can share with you guys is like the questions posed, like what is your personal brand on social media? The focus for me is to make sure that if something that I put out is content that no one else can give. Literally no one else in the world can give the content that I'm giving. I want to be the best at specifically what I'm doing. And so I've got to be honest about the way I go and produce my content or put the content out there. You will never see me talk about a defensive lineman and putting out content. That is not what I'm going to be my best at. I played quarterback and I know offense. So I want to make sure that that is my focus. People will constantly want that stuff. So I want to be the best and the only person in the world at providing what I can provide content-wise. That does limit me. Yes, it does limit the things that I'm potentially willing or able or wanting to do. But I want to be like the singular voice at just that. I don't want to just be the person who tries to cover everything. I believe that there's plenty of people who want to tell you how much they know about everything. I just try to have content that no one else can provide. I also try to be educational and entertaining. One of the things about, I was a backup quarterback in the NFL for the majority of my career. Had to get along with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different personalities. So I try to like balance the educational aspect. I'm probably 80% educational, 20% entertaining. I know that nobody wants a heavy dose of one or the other, so I try to be conscious of that as well. I try to be very real. Most people know of a play that I'm super famous for. I made a pretty big gaffe in one of my playing days that if you went on YouTube and typed in my name, you would not struggle to find. And I try to be super real about it and laugh about it. I think that is something that's made me endearing to people in a way. I don't run from it. The more vulnerable and real that I can be towards people that not only are coming to my page to look at some football stuff that they might geek out about, but also, okay, this dude's able to laugh at himself. He doesn't, kind of take things too seriously. That is the part of the brand that I want. I'm also very conscious of, and this isn't for everybody, but I know what to stay away from as well. I make very conscious efforts to stay away from stuff that, and this might not be the popular opinion, but I don't really dive into stuff that's super controversial. There's, again, focusing on what my brand is going to be on social media. I don't want to be the person that is going to start Twitter storms or fires or controversial things. Do I have opinions about them? Absolutely. Does it benefit me or my social media page or my Twitter page or my brand to jump in and get into the middle of it? No. 99 out of 100 times it does, because that's not what I want my Twitter page to be about. So I'm very strategic of like some of the things that I will be involved in and some of the things I won't be involved in. Brand-wise, I look at it like this, and I try to share this, is we as people spend a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of time on the way we present ourselves. the clothes that we wear, the shoes that we buy, the makeup that we buy, the clothes, the cars that you have, all those things. We spend a lot of time, and it's important to us. It's important that people see us in a certain way. I look at social media the same way. It's just another time for me to step out in public, and this is a representation of me. And so there might be somebody scrolling through the internet and they've never heard my name before, and they might see one thing on my Twitter page. And if it's important for me to look a certain way, and dress a certain way, and carry myself a certain way, I want to have that same mindset when it comes to my brand on social media. So if we're going to spend all that effort and conscious time and money to look a certain, again, dress a certain way, have clothes, car, all that stuff, which is great, I believe that that same kind of effort and focus should be, really as a part of our social media as well. I try to do that. I think the next question is like, how has social media evolved for me? I lean towards talking a lot about Twitter because that's what I use the most. Social media, or my Twitter page, has become my own network. It has become my ESPN. It has become my NFL network, or whatever 3-letter or 4-letter network that we want to describe. That's how it's been used for me. This is my way to be out there and creating my own network of the things that I want to share with people. And so that was never part of my past. Like I said, I was not involved in social media. So a big part of that is fan interaction. I try to make sure that I treat every aspect of what I do almost like a daily interview. A daily interview. Interviews are another opportunity. Again, I never know who's paying attention. I never know who's listening or who's going to go through my page or scroll past my page. So it's a daily interview for me. I try to be super interactive with fans. I'm conscious of what I say, how I say it, and when I say it. Now, I was fortunate when I signed on with ESPN, a person who's important there said, listen, don't get involved in any of the negativity. And I was like, yeah, I really don't that much. And there's a person who was, climbing the ladder really quickly at ESPN. He had a super bright future, and he was very combative with the people, trolls, however you want to call them on social media. People who always had to say something. He was always combative. And that person was brought to my attention. They said, listen, you could be this guy, or you could have the future that this guy had, but you got to avoid the negative. And so I do not interact with people on my social media page who are negative. I don't. It's 100% to 0. If you say something that I disagree with, but it's in a respectful way, if you want to interact, if you want to compliment or be cool, I try to make a conscious effort of interacting with somebody on my page, multiple people on my page on a daily basis. It can't just be about my content and then me just using people. People have to feel like we're friends in a way, like we're boys, like we're cool. And so I try to make a conscious effort of doing that. And that would be something that I would encourage anybody is utilizing, again, I constantly use social media and the word weapon. It's a weapon for me. It's a weapon for me to educate people. It's a weapon for me to differentiate myself from others. And it's also a weapon for me to build people that are interested in what I have to offer or what I have to say. Negative, I have no time. Is it hard? Absolutely. It's hard for me to ignore some stuff. Driving up here today, I had about 300 people on my Twitter page say stuff that I would love to comment back on. But the way that it was kind of best described to me was it's just poison. And I don't want to give poison any kind of time on my page or in my life or whatnot. And so that would be a big encouragement from me to anybody else is stay away from the negativity. It's easy to be words, but once you make that commitment, it's a lot easier to kind of follow through with it. Does social media help my job? The easy answer is duh. I had kind of mentioned how social media really gave me the avenue to get into my job. So I talked about me breaking down that play and it becoming kind of a viral sensation, whatnot. What happened was I started doing it more and more, and I got a couple calls from radio stations. And I would go on the radio, and and it kind of presented more opportunities. And then one day, NFL Network had called, and I had no interaction with NFL Network previous to this time. And they said, hey, we like what you do on Twitter. Would you be willing to come on our show and do the same stuff you do on Twitter? I said, sure. So I would drive back and forth to New York City a couple times, whatnot, doing the same stuff. From NFL Network came CBS and CBS said, hey, we like this, will you come on? Yeah, and then Fox and then ESPN. And so the point of that whole story is, yes, social media absolutely helped me get my job. I also had no idea that all those networks were paying attention. I had no idea who was looking at my page. I was just doing it to have fun and cross my fingers and hope that somebody would see it important. The point is, we have no idea, because the social media aspect is so widespread and connected, you never know who's going to see what you're producing, what you're putting out. You never know who's monitoring it. You don't know who's sharing it with who, and the important people. I went from, and Cabby's in the back of the room, I signed with ESPN in late August, so 7 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that. A year ago, at this point, I was like, hopefully I could get on radio or something like that. I was just crossing my fingers. And because of Twitter, I was able to, have the opportunities that were presented to me, thankfully. But social media absolutely helped me kind of land my job. I guess, like, how do I incorporate it nowadays? Like, now that it's grown, now that I work for a 4-letter network in ESPN, like, how do I incorporate it? One, what I do on my social media is as important as what I do on television. I was on Get Up this morning in New York. The focus and the attention and the detail that I paid and kind of gave that show is the same amount of attention and focus and detail that I give to my Twitter page. It is just an extension of that. And so it is not, I don't look at it as anything less than the opportunity for me to be on television. I'm very strategic with how I use it. I try to focus on throwing punches with my social media. I don't focus on throwing jabs. I want to throw haymakers. Plenty of people are just using social media and they drown you with information. I want to throw haymaker jabs. I want to make sure that when I do put something out there, it is not somebody just scrolling through. My wife will sit on her phone all night on Instagram and go blog after blog after blog after blog because it's the same stuff over and over. Nobody's throwing actual punches. That is my focus. I try to do that with television, and again, trying to treat them equally, I try to do it with social media. Fans, the fans are an important part of it. I've talked about how I treat negative, the trolls of it. I give them the same kind of respect as I treat the people that want to have the good, positive interaction. Both are super important to me. One gets my attention, one does not. Do I use other analysts? Do I incorporate other analysts? Absolutely. One, it elevates the conversation. It elevates if my goal at the end of the day is to make sure that people are into what I'm doing and people are becoming educated and they value my input, then the more that other people who know football like us or like me do, the more I can get them into the conversation, the more people are drawn in. The more people want to look forward to, okay, it's Wednesday, what's Thursday, what are they going to bring? Are they going to talk about this again? And now we've gained fans because we've elevated the conversation, we've educated their ability to understand what we're talking about. And then, do I incorporate other players? Sometimes, I like to give props to players. I also am very conscious. This is not an egotistical thing. I don't necessarily want to tee people up to have the opportunity to capitalize on what I did, the work that I did. And so I don't necessarily utilize other players that much, or other ex-players that much, because I'm not going to allow them to kind of jump on my social media page and benefit from it. So that's kind of like how I go about utilizing social media, the growth that's happened from it for me. I guess I'll show you guys, I've mentioned Twitter a lot, you've heard me say that a lot. I'll show you just kind of a couple examples of how I go about really utilizing it and trying to differentiate. So this, I'll go to this clip. This clip is from before the Super Bowl. There's probably no Patriot fans in the room, but I have access to tape, like football tape, that maybe the general public doesn't have access to, so it's a benefit. And I try to differentiate myself compared to other people. And instead of when the Patriots were going to play the Rams in the Super Bowl, I was like, all right, everyone's going to talk about blah, 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 but how can I be different than somebody else? And so utilizing a skill set that I had kind of accrued from watching way too much tape as a player, I posted this on the internet and said, the Patriots defensive line, people who don't know football, it is the guys with their hands down on the ground, number 54, number 53, I was like, they'll be really good, they'll be a huge impact in the Super Bowl because we call them games where like those guys will move around all the time in kind of being favorable matchups. So I posted this on Twitter before the game. It got
something to watch for in the Super Bowl that New England does so well on defense that will challenge the Rams' offensive line. No matter.
Okay, so one, I have a little bit of an annoying voice in that, but like, I'm focused on energy too. Like, I want to make sure, again, haymakers. No one's tuning into my Twitter page and hear me going like, all right, I think this could be important. I don't ever use the two words, I think. Anybody can say that. I want to make a definitive comment on my social media just like I would on television.
How good they are is this third down, 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebacker look that's up in the line of scrimmage. The reason why it's so difficult with New England is because Hightower and Van Noy's linebackers are so big and physical that when they get up in the line, you really have to treat them as defensive linemen. You don't want a running back blocking them. So as an offense,
So first part is content that nobody else can really offer. Why does that matter? Okay, there are 2 people up there. Like, why are wise? Like, be a whiner. Why can you tell me something different about a product or clothes, whatever it is? What's different about it and why is it different? So I'm trying to be focused on telling people why.
We're going to go, okay, our 5 offensive linemen are responsible for those 5. We'll make a 5-0 call. You basically have them in man wherever they go. And then New England starts these internal pick games. Watch this first one against Kansas City. Butler and Hightower are basically going to go inside. Van Noy's patient off the line, and then he's going to wrap around. Watch the communication it forces these guys for Kansas City on the offensive line and just getting stressed to communicate and basically pass things across all the way.
So again, trying to give people something that they can't get anywhere else. This, to be honest, takes a lot of time. I sit there and watch tape for hours to find one clip. It's annoying, but it's worth the 102,000 views for me. That's a big deal. Giving people things that they can't get anywhere else is a focus of mine. There's more to that. It ended up being a relatively positive thing because that was a big part of the Super Bowl. But just again, the focus of giving people stuff that they can't get anywhere else. This is the one that kind of blew up for me during football season.
Incredible stuff.
Big.
The greatest thing is the Colts defense.
I had 102,000 views. That other one, this had 639,000 views. Mainly just because of the presentation and also trying to get people to understand. This was on my Twitter off of a show, but
they're liars. So here's the first thing, Greeny. Put our eyes to Lamar Miller.
I want to go back to the beginning because
I've never been more excited to do a touchdown. Listen, people at home, drop what you're doing, pay attention. This is incredible stuff. The greatest thing is the Colts defense. They're liars.
That was a focus of mine because it's almost like a movie trailer. Movie trailers, we've all seen movies that stunk that had really good movie trailers. Part of social media as well is the movie trailer aspect of getting people to pay attention for 2 minutes. Getting someone to go, I don't know if this is going to be good or not, but that first 5 seconds or 8 seconds that you wrote something or said something, now I'm in. Now I'm in. Now that movie trailer has sold me. That was a big part, I believe, of what kind of let this grow to be what it was me going, people at home, pay attention, I've never seen this before. That's going to get somebody to pay attention. And then, in a way, me saying that one of the teams lied. Okay, so like, again, what do you mean? Why are you telling that to me? And then providing content or stuff that no one else can do. And it ended up being a really big thing that generated a lot of conversation and whatnot, but the big part of that was me utilizing that social media aspect almost like a mini movie trailer. So I could stand up here and show these all day. You guys probably aren't super interested in them like that, but that was kind of a big part of, that was a focus of mine for social media this year. And that's kind of where it stands. Questions? Not a single question. I see that one. And yes, you can rock a blazer with a hoodie.
So my question is, a big part of what you're saying is providing information that no one else does.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of about a year into this process of going from Claire to providing this level of access, which is really, seems to be like inside a quarterback room, the terms you're talking about. Sports and the media are kind of a copycat league, and so what do you do to keep your brand fresh as people are catching on that this is clearly working and getting a lot of attention?
There's just not a lot of people on the planet who can do it like that. That's the truth. I tell people that. Like, first of all, there's not a lot of people that spent 12 years as a backup in the NFL, so I'm fortunate with that. And then kind of the articulation aspect of it, like I'm very fortunate to have the experience that I had. Like, I played on 5 different teams in 7 different offenses, 8 different coaches, thousands of different teammates. All of those have been a learning experience that I've kind of paid attention to subconsciously, and now I utilize it. I don't necessarily, I'm not focused on anybody else really. I just I understand what I'm good at and where the weakness may be, and I focus on what I'm good at and constantly improving that. I don't really believe that there's a lot of people that are going to be able, there's not a lot of people that are willing to work like that. That's the truth of it. Like, there's not a lot of people, for me to find that clip, it literally took 7 hours of tape on a Tuesday. And I remember calling the producer of the show and be like, dude, I have to come up and do this clip. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, trust me, it'll be worth it. So it's like anything else, like the willing to grind and do the dirty work. And then the freshness aspect of utilizing it is focusing on, like, I pay attention to when I post something, I pay attention to what people say when I post it. The positive stuff. The negative stuff, unless it's like a criticism that could be productive, I pay attention to what people say. Like, oh man, this thing is super cool. Fine, I'm in. Like, or this dude was great, but he spent too much time talking about a frozen picture. You know, and so I'm conscious of, all right, well, people don't. That's something I learned. Like, initially, when I started doing this stuff, I would have the picture frozen for a long period of time and go over super long explanations and then press play. And someone was like, dude, I can't sit there for an hour and look at a picture the whole time. And so I started just playing and playing it. So if I'm going to use social media as a weapon and a conduit between you and I got to listen. And so that is a way that I stay fresh. Is like what fans are saying, what people are saying. I don't think that I know it all. Especially when it comes to people taking stuff in, and so I want to learn from people when it comes to that stuff, sharing stuff. This creek right here is super annoying.
So where do you want to go next in your career? Are you satisfied with staying on TV and breaking down plays, or would you rather be in the booth, kind of breaking down the play specifically? You know,
I do games. For college football. I'm in the booth. Where am I? Like, where do I go next? I learned this a couple weeks ago, having a conversation with people at ESPN. Whatever they deem important is where I want to be. So, do I enjoy this? Absolutely. People always ask me, like, do you want to coach? Yes, I would love to, but I view this as coaching. I'm just coaching thousands or however many people rather than coaching a football team. I value being like a dad and a husband too much. I know what that lifestyle looks for coaches. But yeah, I don't necessarily know what's next. I certainly have my goals, but I like doing the booth. I like being part of live games, and then I like being on kind of studio shows as well. Thank you.